Sorry. Good morning. My name is Charity. I remember last time I did the Bible reading, I was paired with Jody and Stu, the Giants. That's why I got lost. I didn't know the Bible reading, but thankfully today I am found. I am teamed up again with Joe. Bible reading is found in Matthew verses 9 to 13. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." And we move to the book of Hosea, chapter 6, verse 1 to 6. "Come, let us return to the Lord, for it is He who has torn, and He will heal us. He has struck down, and He will bind us up. After 2 days He will revive us. On the third day He will raise us up, that we may live before Him. Let us press on to know the Lord. His appearing is as sure as the dawn. He will come to us like the showers, like the spring rains that water the earth. What shall I do with you, O Ephraim? What shall I do with you, O Judah? Your love is like a morning cloud, like the dew that goes away early. Therefore I have hewn them by the prophets. I have killed them by the words of my mouth, and my judgment goes forth as the light. For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings."
Good morning. Oh boy, let's try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, you are awake. Good. Let me find. I'm not often one who preaches from notes, but this morning my thoughts with this one at points were jumbled up. In simple ways, it's exactly that verse. God desires us to act kindly to others and to be in relationship with God. All right, I'm done. If you get that, you've gotten most of what I'm aiming for with today. But we are going to do a few other things. Before I get too much into the sermon specifically, I want to talk a little bit about my experience going to the Open Baptist this last week. And with this, in many ways, we went because I needed a body of people here in Australia that holds my credentials. For you guys, it's important to have a pastor who has some credentials and has people that hold me accountable and who walk the journey with me. And I wasn't sure what body to do that with. And we were going to see, is this a body that I would like to, and you guys would like to hold my credentials? My experience going there was, as I was walking in the first time, I had somebody who walked out and was like, "Oh, you've got to be a hearse. We're so excited that you're here. Hi, Micah." And I didn't even have a name tag on. I was like, wow. And these were people that I didn't know. And I came to quickly realize that all of the people in the wider Baptist world that I know were there. They were people that had met my parents. They were people that had met my sister. They had worked with my sister for years. And right away, I had a woman came up and gave me a hug and was like, "I'm so excited that you're here. We love Mariah and we love you." And I was like, wow, that is just a good way to start off a conference, is with that kind of a greeting. I really walked away more energized than what I thought I would. And I want to encourage you, we're going to send out a link to 2 videos, the opening address and the closing address, which were done by Steve. They were fantastic. He started off asking us, what does open mean for you? And for me, I right away went to what I think I've done with you guys before. Jesus is the center, and if we have a centered set, that we're facing towards Jesus and we're going to be more like Jesus, that's what it is. Instead of a bounded set where here's the boundaries and you have to just make sure that you're inside those boundaries, and we spend all our time in the boundaries. And I said that before I heard him start talking. And as he talked, I went, this guy's been reading the same books as me. And he uses a lot of the same points that I'm like, I'm really excited about. And I think his message and a lot of what I experienced there speaks to the heart of who we are as a group. So I will send out those in the next newsletter, and I encourage you, if you have some time, listen to both of them, watch both of them. They were both fantastic. If you have other questions about how the conference went, I would love for you to talk with Callum or myself or Haley, who also went, and ask questions about how our experience was there. But that's a little bit of my experience. I also want to name one other thing that I did this last week that was a little bit different. And I told you guys about this, that I got a call from the Burwood Police Department to go and have a meeting with them with a whole bunch of other faith leaders. And I wasn't 100% sure what it was, and I didn't know much about Harmony Day, because when I had lived here before, that wasn't necessarily something that was very emphasized. But I went on Thursday, which is actually the day before Harmony Day, and I was in a room with about, I would say, 40 to 50 of us that were in there of all different faiths, all different backgrounds. There were Catholics, there were me as a Mennonite and a Baptist, there were other Baptists, there were all sorts of other faith groups. There was Muslim groups that were there. There was also a Kung Fu group that was there representing one of the temples. And it brought in a lot of diversity. And we talked about some of the violence that's happening in our society. And the police were saying, how can you be involved? How can you be helping? One of the statistics that everybody that I've said it to since is sort of like, yeah, no duh. But for me, really struck me is the police said we spend 60% of our time responding to one issue. Guess what it was? Well, gee, you guys all know this. For me, that caught me off guard. 60% of their time dealing with domestic violence. Wow. And it was interesting being in that room. They asked the question of, how can you all be helping with this? And everybody's response was after the fact. None of it was on prevention. And I spoke up and I said, well, my parents have done a lot of work on communication that doesn't have violence and on restorative justice, but also teaching people how to have conflict, because conflict is a natural part of life. But how do you have conflict without bashing your spouse? And I said, who is working on this in the community? Absolutely crickets, completely silent. All these different agencies, and none of them were working in that space. Afterwards, I keep wanting to say commissioner, not the commissioner, it's not captain, commander. The police commander who is of this area came to me and said, I'd love to talk with you more about this. Is this something that your church might have interest in? And I thought, interesting. As we're exploring what is it that the world from us, our community needs from us, I wonder if this is a space for us to work at not the reporting afterwards, but how do we work on prevention of violence? How do we call people into conflict in good ways, in constructive ways? How do we help give skills other than just bashing each other? So I want to explore that more with us in weeks to come. But that's been part of my week leading up till today. Today we're continuing on with a bit of our theme here of fasting to the kingdom of God. And in Lent broader, part of it is fasting. And here specifically we're talking about fasting to what God has for us, who we are as the kingdom of God. Today specifically, let me do this quote first before we go to that. This is a quote that I've read a couple of times in a couple of sermons, but it comes from the book, What is the Church and Why Does It Exist? By David Fitch. And the church is a community of practices that join people together in their submission to Jesus as Lord. And this is the one that talks about, it wasn't necessarily about the creeds. They came later and sort of changed how the church was. But it's very much saying these practices are what helped form us. So in the series, we are working with practices. We're talking about them, and hopefully we're trying them out. And practices aren't anything super special in themselves, but they are things that empower us to do what we otherwise could not do. So if you want to be able to hit a baseball, you would learn and practice that multiple times so that in a game you can actually do it. You would have somebody throw curveballs and fastballs and other things, so you practice so you can do it. Same is true with all the faith practices. We practice them so then when we run into life situations, we're able to live the way that Jesus did. So in the direction we're going today is fasting 2 acts of kindness. Now, anytime that we start talking about action and doing something with our faith, there quickly becomes this question about, are you sliding into works-based faith? Is your salvation based on your good works? And I want to start off by saying, no. Everything that we do is saying that it is through the work of Jesus, and especially as we're coming here in Lent, going towards Easter, that we're celebrating that it is in Jesus that we find our salvation. In his life, his teachings, his discipleship, his death, and his resurrection, we have our salvation there. And it's there completely. There is this saying that many from my faith tradition, people have come to us and said, we see all these good works, but you've got a works-based faith. You're trying to be saved by your good works. We often say this: we are saved by grace and not by good works. But we are saved by grace for good works. Now, the key with this is it's a response. God has acted, God has saved, and it's in response to the wonderful love of God that we act in love towards others. And this is not a New Testament thing. This started before that. So if you think back and you remember as the people were being saved in the Old Testament from slavery, then they get the law, or we interpret it as saying the law. The word Torah has as much of saying teaching as law. They get this teaching or the law that they're asked to follow, but it's framed as a response. And often the heart of that we look at as the 10 Commandments. Oops, that didn't move forward. Let's try to do that. This is the start of the 10 Commandments. And I had a Bible professor who said every time we read one of the 10 Commandments, we really should go back to this start and read this, because all of the commandments are in a response to this. So this is Deuteronomy 5:6. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And then it goes on. Therefore, do this. Don't have any other gods except for me. Then come back again to this. I'm the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, who brought you out of the house of slavery. And then the other things that we're told in the 10 Commandments. It's God acts, and then we're called to respond. And it's important when we're thinking about actions and good actions that we frame it this way, that God acts first and we respond, not the other way around. It's not that we have to act in particular ways so that God will love us. There's so many times when we get caught up in doing good things that we kind of feel like it's, we have to do this so that we make it into heaven. And that's not it at all. So I want us just to hold some of that as we are moving on. And I've just lost my place. So we're coming to a time of Lent. And in Lent, there's a couple of things that we're doing. Lent is this time where we're moving towards the cross with Jesus. We're moving along towards Jerusalem. And Jesus, in Matthew, it says that he turns and sets his face towards Jerusalem and starts walking. And we're moving on this journey. And often Christians are experiencing this again with Jesus And they do it by celebrating in fasting, in prayer, and often in almsgiving. Now, the interesting thing here when we talk about money is often we get uncomfortable talking about money. It's rare that we have conversations openly with, what do you make? How much do you give? These are things that make us as Westerners very uncomfortable. But it's also the kind of thing that we feel like it's a safe way for us to give to the church. Almsgiving wasn't necessarily what they would do as offering, but would have been a specific thing, giving to the poor in particular. But sometimes those of us that are wealthier, it's an easy way, a sort of an easy out to, I'm giving my money so that somebody else can work with that, and I don't have to. In some ways, giving alms has become a way of also putting distance between me and other people's suffering. I can give money so that somebody else can do it, and I can stay distant from other people's pain, other people's life circumstances. The idea, though, behind almsgiving is it is a pouring out of generosity. And I think of the story of when Jesus was in the temple, and he was with his disciples, and he was watching people giving alms to the poor, putting it into a box, and a lot of them came along and put in large amounts of money. And then a widow came and put in just 2 small coins. And they were the smallest of the coins that they had at that time. And Jesus said, she has put in more than all the others, because others have put out of their wealth and their abundance, their extra. And she has put from all of her need. I think in that there is this idea of moving us past our comfort level and generosity in a way that puts us in contact with other people's need, and in some ways our own. So with almsgiving, it's really a calling us to be generous with who we are and what we have. And I think a call for us to not just give money, but to act kindly towards others. I want to look at our passage today. And this has been read, and I want to read back through part of it again. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at a tax collecting station. Now here it doesn't say specifically that Matthew was the tax collector, the one who was collecting the taxes, but he was. So he was there at his job collecting taxes. Go back to it. And Jesus said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with Jesus and his disciples. Now, Steve, over the weekend at the Open Baptist thing, pointed out here that almost always when there are conversations about tax collectors, they're always paired with sinners. Now, Steve, who was talking, is a lawyer, and he said, sometimes I feel like it's the lawyers and the sinners get lumped together in our day. But it's interesting that he points this out. Tax collectors in that time, not the same way today, but in that time they were the collaborators with Rome. They were the ones who were helping to oppress the people at the time. So they were hugely unpopular with the general public. And they're seen in that way as sinners. So here Jesus is with one of these hugely unpopular people who's seen as a sinner. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said to them, now with this response, there's 2 of these lines that feel like they flow really easily together. And then there's a middle line that's a little different, but those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. And then skipping down to that bottom line, for I have come to call the righteous, but I have not, let me read that again. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Those 2 lines seem to go very well, and they seem like they flow together. But then we have this line in the middle, which is one of those, what's Jesus on about here? What is this? Go and learn what this means. And then he's quoting here, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. What does this have to do with the other two? And where does this come from? So it comes out of Hosea, and we've read this, but I want to do a little bit with sort of background on this book. Partially, I was talking with Carla, and she was reading it, and she said, Hosea, yeah, I don't remember a lot about that book. And I'm guessing for a number of the rest of you, you're like, yeah, I don't remember a lot about that book. The minor prophets are often ones that we don't talk about a lot. We often speak about Micah and Micah 6:8, but I'm guessing some of us would struggle with a lot of the other minor prophets. So a little bit about what's going on in Hosea's time and where this fits so that we understand what's going on in this book. So Hosea, and he's working in a time that is in the northern kingdom. So there was, in the time when there was a united kingdom, Saul, David, and Solomon, that's the time when all of the kingdom was together under one kingdom. Then it splits to the north, which was called Israel, and the south, which is Judah. And this is written in a time where they are under the king Jeroboam, and Jeroboam is in particularly really not a great king and not very faithful. And this is right before the time where the Assyrians come in and take over the northern kingdom. And Hosea is writing in this time where the people are not very faithful. They are not necessarily staying in their relationship with God well, and they're not following the commandments, and they're constantly breaking the commandments, especially those ones that they're called to care for the poor. But in their worship, they're still doing all of the same worship practices, but they're doing them for God and also for Baal at the same time. So they're still going and they're doing the feasts and the fasting, and they're still doing sacrifices, but for them it has become more transactional. And for me, as I studied this passage, this is the part that has really come to me, this might be the heart of what this is. Their faith practices have become transactional. We do this, and then we get this from God. We do these sacrifices, and then God blesses us. And I find this a really interesting thing. It makes me go, how much do we also sometimes enter into our faith experience in a transactional concept? If we do these things, then we're good with God, or God blesses us. So let's actually look here as God's trying to work with them in this and trying to say, maybe this is a better response. So come, let us return to Yahweh. Now, I will say that I'm reading from a different translation here. This Bible is I've just lost the name of it. It's a newer translation, and it works more with trying to name the gender things a little bit more carefully than a lot of Bibles do. A lot of Bibles just always use he for God, and this one actually uses more of the names specifically. And it also, when God is referred to as female, it puts those in. Inclusive Bible. Thank you, that was the word. So it'll be a little bit different from how we've read it before. But I want to hear this. Come, let us return to Yahweh. So here it is writing the name of God without vowels, which is the way that the Jews would have written it. The one who has torn us asunder will make us whole. The one who struck us down will bind our wounds. Now this next verse, if I had another 3 or 4 days to work on, this is the one that I would look at because it sounds somewhat like it's leaning towards this is what happened with Jesus. In 2 days, God will bring us back to life, and on the third day, God will restore us so that we will live in the presence of the Most High. In the other translation that we had, it more sounds like on the third day, God will bring us back to life and will raise us up. And it uses the same language of Jesus being raised up. So I would love to explore that more. Let us come to know Yahweh intimately and pursue that knowledge with zealous. Now here, when it's using the language of knowing, this is a different type of knowing of, I know about the President of the United States, but I don't know him like I would know my brother. This here is that deeper, I know this person because I've engaged with them. I know them, not just I know about them. So in the words that are used there of knowledge, it's that more intimate here. So seeking that knowledge zealously. And as sure as the sun rises in the morning, God will come and will return us like the rain of winter, like the rains of spring that water the earth. Oh, Ephraim, and now this here is how he was referring to the northern kingdom. What am I going to do with you? And Judah, now the southern kingdom, what am I going to do with you? Your devotion is like the morning fog. Oh boy, I would not want my devotion named this way. Morning fog is annoying, and then it's gone. Wow, your devotion is like fog. That's a great compliment for you. Like the dew of the morning that vanishes. So what is it that God is trying to do here? So I will hack them to pieces through my prophets and slay them with words of my mouth. My judgment flashes like the lightning before you. I do not want this job description as a prophet because, boy, no wonder they killed the prophets. But the prophets are the ones saying, calling them back, calling them back. And then we have this line, for I desire kindness towards others, not sacrifice. Acknowledgement of God. And again, that idea there of acknowledgement of God is both recognizing God's place, but also a deeper intimacy that's being invited there. Not burnt offerings. So he's getting at some of this transactional idea that the people have of we're getting what we want from God by doing these things. And God's saying, I don't want that transactional relationship. I want you to know me, and I want you to act with kindness towards others. For I desire kindness towards others, not sacrifice, acknowledgement of God, not burnt offerings. Or saying it in a more simple way, God desires for us to be kind towards others and to be in relationship with God. Now, this is a part 2 thing. This week we're talking about this, and sometimes talking about it doesn't really get us to embodied action. That's next week. Next week, what we're going to be doing is trying to practice embodied these 2 things. And we're trying to do these together. So it's not a work day. It will be as part of our worship service, and part of our worship service is which is calling us to be in relationship with God. And we're going to pair in that space of working in prayer and in our relationship with God, we're going to move out and do some acts of kindness. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I want you to look at this and think of the words of Jesus. What phrase or what passage comes to mind when you see this and you think of Jesus' key teachings? Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor. So it comes out of Matthew 22. Wait, hang on. Yes, Matthew 22. And here, Jesus then responds by saying the 2 greatest commandments is love the Lord your God and love others as you love yourself. And then goes on to say, all of the law, all of the teachings, everything that's really important that you need to understand hangs on these 2. Get this right, and you get it right. So I'm going to continue to encourage us to fast, to pray, which is that space of engaging with God in relationship, not just a knowing about, but a knowing, getting to be known and knowing, and to act in kindness towards others. Even when that might be acting in kindness towards someone who doesn't like us or our enemy. Simple message, hard to live out. And there I'm going to end the sermon for the moment until we get to part 2. But for part 2, you need some notes for what we're going to do next week. So this lead up of we are being called into relationship with God and called to act in kindness for others, how are we going to practice that next week? So here are your notes for next Sunday, and I'm going to then put them in the newsletter as well. So first of all, we're going to have some options for different types of mobility. So if you are able to bend down and pick something up, if you're able to lift something, there's going to be activities for you. If you're not really feeling like you can do that, but you can still walk and engage with somebody, there's going to be options for you. If it's the kind of thing of, really, I'm going to prefer to sit, there's going to be some options for you. So we'll have different options that are happening, and I will send them out to you in the newsletter as I confirm who's going to be working with each one, so that you'll have a bit of an idea as you come what you'll be able to engage with. Bring gloves and wear clothes that you can get dirty. Acts of kindness sometimes are putting us in spaces where we are going to maybe get dirty. So don't wear your nicest clothes, and if you have work gloves, bring them. I will have extras. But it's not a work day. Come ready to pray. All of what we will be doing will be couched in prayer. It will be surrounded with an activity of prayer, being in relationship with God. The idea will be we'll come, we'll worship, we'll do some here, but then we're going to go out in prayer to do small acts of kindness. Now, let me just say, with those acts of kindness, they're practice. They aren't the be-all and end-all. Some people might say, well, they're just small. Are they just token? The same way that you don't just go out and run a marathon, you have to start off small with a practice of, at least I'm going to walk up and down some steps and get me going, or I'll go for a little bit longer of a walk. The practices that we'll be doing are simply that, a practice. They're not the end thing of being kind to everyone. But we're going to do small acts of kindness, and then we're going to come back in and we're going to reflect on what that experience has been. So I'm excited for where we go next week. How we will continue to engage in relationship with God, to know God, and start practicing small acts of kindness. Let me pray for us. God, we thank you that you are a God that has done the work of salvation. You have come in Jesus. You have shown us that there is nothing to fear in you. You have shown us how to have relationship, and you have again shown your faithfulness to us, even when we are not faithful to you. You have sent your messengers, your scriptures, and those that are to call us back to you. As we learn to be more like you, as we reenact your life in Lent, help us to be shaped more like you. And may your love flow through us in acts of kindness and love to the world. And may it both transform us and our world. And we ask for this in the power of your Spirit and in the power of Jesus' name. Amen.